all for being here today. I think my name is Lonnie, but it might be Mike, and I'll actually tell you the story behind that. I think this is a pretty good tradition, and we should carry it on with our kids, right? We share these memories today hoping that we could maybe help someone who have similar circumstances as my mother did, because I think that in a lot of ways we pushed Mother to salvation. I want to take a date, which was when she gave her life to Christ, was October 7th, 1968. I want to call that 0 BC, 0 before Christ. And we'll make that the date that we focus on here today. She didn't want us to focus on her. She wanted us to focus on the Lord and what He had done for her. So first of all, we're going to go to 10 BC, which was the year that I was born, because they're my memories, right? Of course, I don't have memories of being born, but I heard the stories of how Mom and I were close to death, and that before they did the C-section, they were trying to get blood to the hospital to ensure that we would have a better chance of survival. So they enlisted my father to drive to Seattle to the blood bank to get the blood. Does that make any sense? I would hope they don't do that today. I think you could have called a cab and said, bring me some blood. But anyway, that's the way the story goes, and that, of course, Dad going to Seattle, he needed somebody to help him, so he picked up a partner, and they headed off to Seattle. But before they left, they had to drink some courage, because driving to Seattle was a scary thing. So I never heard the end of the story. I don't know where Dad ended up, but they went ahead and delivered me despite the fact of not having the blood, and evidently we both survived. But I think that Mom and I had a special bond because of that. So that might have pushed her towards 0 BC a little bit. The next event I want to talk about was just right outside these windows here. The kids used to play baseball. I don't know how they didn't break any windows. They obviously were not any good, but they played baseball. And I was about 4 years old. And I was just watching because I was too little to play. And I don't want to use names, but the first person, when the person that came up to bat that I knew the best, we'll call him Brother. I stood in front of him and I said, I want to bat. And he said, move or I'll swing. And I said, I want to bat. And he said, move or I'll swing. And I learned a lesson that he does what he says, and that I was knocked out cold. And, you know, I think in today's environment, you would see aid cars, hold your neck still in case your neck's broken, and maybe even a life flight, I don't know. So I remember waking up as my head's wobbling around, being carried to the house, which is right over here we lived. And the person that was carrying me, none other than Bob Fleiss, carrying me to my mother. And I remember Mother calling Dr. Tate. I guess that's what you did. There was no 911. There was nothing like that. I think we had a party line for a telephone. And she got on the phone with Dr. Tate, and Dr. Tate said, she described the symptoms, which, were probably pretty loopy. And I heard from Dr. Tate that keep an eye on him, keep him awake, and give him ice cream. Hey, I thought that was cool. And I must have had a hard head, because I was telling my sister about this story, and she said she did it when I was a baby. Swung it around the back and hit me right in the head. So I've had a lot of hits in the head. I remember Mom being, at that time, listening to Vic talk. I'd never heard a lot of that before myself, but Mom was a great housewife. She was always home. She was always there. And I don't know, do you remember how many dozen cookies she baked a week? I think, I want to say 12 dozen cookies a week for Dad, who would take them to work, and he was a carpenter, so he worked hard. But he would share cookies with his whole crew, but Mom would do that, bake 12 cookies a week. 12 dozen cookies. Maybe because of being hit in the head too many times, I remember one time that Mom said, "Get your shoes, we're going to town." So I was probably around 4. Hopefully this happened after I was hit in the head several times. Well, we got to town, we walked in the store, and the clerk was kind of laughing at her, and he looked down at my shoes, and I had one tennis shoe on and one cowboy boot. And Mom was mortified. I mean, she just was horrified by the thought that she could let me get out of the house without the correct shoes on. But it happened. This next story is difficult for me because from the age of 0 to the age of 6, my name was Mike. I knew nothing different. I was Mike. You guys call me Mike. Family calls me Mike. Mom still fills out my cards, Mike, or did fill out my cards, Mike. My last birthday card said Mike. So Mom and I went to school to register for first grade. And I remember standing next to her, holding her hand in front of Mrs. Murphy. And we registered, and Mrs. Murphy says, "What does he go by? Which name?" And my mom said, "Mike." And Mrs. Murphy looked down at the sheet of paper and said, that my mom had filled out, and said, "But that's not his name." And of course, I'm confused. What is my name? And so she said, "Well, we could just call him Lonnie then." And that was the first time I had ever heard that name. And I was not happy. I was like, I looked up at her and said, "You gotta be kidding me." It was like my NFL career was over. I did check. And in the history of the NFL, there were 497 Mikes. There were 3 Lonnies spilled with the water. And there there were 28 spelled with the IE. I didn't even get the good version of law.